If you've ever been jolted awake in the middle of the night, wondering if you missed a camera alarm or worse, if someone you love has already slipped out the door, this episode is for you. Hi everyone, I'm Thérèse, and welcome back to New York Girl Again, The After, the podcast for every former caregiver who's now trying to reclaim their strength, rebuild their health, and rediscover joy. Today we're diving into something that still lingers in my nervous system, and maybe yours too. Caregiving PTSD. This isn't caregiving burnout, though that's very real during our caregiving journey. This is about trauma. The kind of trauma that can take root when you've spent night after night fearing your loved one might wander. When you've cared for someone with dementia, cognitive decline, or who was nearing the end of life, and you lived every moment in a heightened state of fear and responsibility. Because when someone you love goes missing, when they vanish into the night, your body doesn't forget. Even after the caregiving ends, you don't just go back to normal. So let me take you back to the night my dad successfully wandered out of the house at 2 a.m. because for the first time ever, the camera alarms didn't wake me. Being jolted awake by alarms had become my nightly routine. It was my new normal in the last year and a half of my dad's life. I had built what I proudly called my 6-camera line of defense, a homemade Fort Knox, using blink cameras that were portable, battery-operated, and attentive enough to catch an attempted escape, but discreet enough to let my dad keep his dignity. Each one had its job, my own little network of quiet guardians, tracking the steps of a man whose heart never stopped chasing purpose, even at 2 a.m., with a walker and a mission. Camera 1, bedroom, floor level. Placed low to protect his privacy, but positioned perfectly to alert me the second his feet hit the ground. Step 1 in what I came to call the Great Escape. If all was calm, he'd shuffle to the bathroom and back to bed. But most nights, that wasn't how it played out. Camera 2, the living room. If he made it here, he was dressed and heading to his recliner, his mission control center, where he'd sit down, put on his Velcro sneakers, and mentally prepare for the next steps. This was no bathroom trip. This was serious. Camera 3, the kitchen. This one was the wild card. If he was in there, one of two things was about to happen. He'd try to cook something, possibly burning down the house, or he was heading to the coat closet. Both options, equally terrifying. Camera 4, the coat closet. Hat on, coat on. This was the moment I knew we were a critical mass. And I do mean mass. His sacred 2 a.m. service at St. Mary's Church that lived only in his heart, and somehow no one thought to tell the priest. At this point, I had minutes, maybe seconds. Camera 5, the garage. Down the ramp he went with his walker and a smile. The wheels of the great jailbreak were officially in motion. This was the final checkpoint before freedom. Camera 6. And just like that, he was gone. Out into the darkness, gliding down the driveway with the determination of a man who had spent weeks planning a jailbreak, with nothing but a walker, a coat, and a moonlit mission. And me? I slept through all of it. To this day, I still don't know how. I wasn't any more exhausted than usual. The only thing I could think of is the ear infection I had just started treating with antibiotic drops for one of those drive-through doctor visits. Felt more like picking up a Frosties at Wendy's than seeing a provider. Do you remember those surreal COVID days when the whole world felt like it had turned upside down? It was 2:20 when I woke up, just 20 minutes after his escape. I rolled over and noticed my phone lit up with a string of missed notifications from the camera system. My stomach dropped. I opened the app and there it was, camera 6. Video footage of the last move of a perfectly timed heist, like the end of Ocean's 11. Only this wasn't Vegas, it was my driveway. And the mastermind was my 87-year-old father on a mission to make it to church. My dad, shuffling down the driveway with his walker, with eyes that could barely see in the daylight, let alone moonlight. I grabbed my keys and sprinted down the street, praying he was still close, that maybe he was moving slowly enough, that maybe I could catch up. But he was gone. I called the police, then a friend in the ER to check if he'd been brought in, hit by a car, injured, or worse. Meanwhile, my brain, ever the overachiever, rolled out the red carpet for every worst-case scenario like it was competing for an Oscar in the best horror film category. The police started searching, and I jumped into my car to join the search. I drove the usual route I would take him to church every morning, but nothing. 4 hours of pure panic. That sickening adrenaline surge, that nausea-inducing what-if, worst-case scenario energy that hijacks your entire system. And then, by some miracle, he came walking back on his own, found by the police crossing the street. Scratches on his face from walking into bushes he couldn't see. No falls, no accidents, no robbery. Just him, asking for a cup of tea and a chance to relax from his adventure. Meanwhile, my nervous system was absolutely fried. Because when someone you love goes missing, something inside you breaks. Your body doesn't forget. Your brain doesn't reset. And my dad wasn't even the first. Years earlier, my uncle, who had undiagnosed cognitive decline, went missing in New York City after a medical appointment. I was living in Pennsylvania at the time. He was supposed to call me that evening to check in. He didn't. I instantly knew something was wrong. I was working a 12-hour overnight shift at a mental health and wellness center for priests and nuns. I updated a few of the night owl priests, and we all gathered in the chapel to pray. And honestly, I thought, this kind of holy dream team? And what had to be a VIP line to God? We'd have my uncle located by sunrise. He wasn't. The next morning, just 2 days before Christmas, I drove straight from my shift to New Jersey to pick up my dad, then down to Queens to file the missing persons report. It took 8 long, terrifying days before he was found. That helplessness I felt during that week has never left me. I made a promise to myself that day. I will never walk past a missing person flyer again. Those 2 events changed me. They change everyone who's lived through something like that. Your body, your brain, your emotions, they don't go back to baseline. Not during the rest of your caregiving journey, and for many of us, not even after it's over. This is more than exhaustion or burnout. This is caregiving-induced trauma. This is caregiver PTSD. And we don't talk about it nearly enough. During our caregiving journey, most of us become familiar with the terms burnout and compassion fatigue. But where does caregiving PTSD fit in? Let's dive into what I call the 3 C's of caregiving's emotional aftermath. and how they each leave their mark in very different ways. Caregiver burnout is the chronic stress. It's the emotional exhaustion, the physical fatigue, the endless self-sacrifice, usually at your own expense. It builds over time, quietly and consistently, as the caregiving load gets heavier and your own needs fall further and further down the list. At first you're tired, then you're always tired. Then one day you find yourself crying in your car or snapping at a loved one and thinking, how did I get here? Some signs of burnout include emotional drain, where you feel like you have nothing left to give. Hopelessness, you start to believe it will never get better. Loss of joy, even the things you once loved feel like chores. Short fuse, you're more irritable and reactive than usual. It includes physical symptoms such as headaches, insomnia, body aches, digestive issues. And there's always the fantasy of escape. We secretly dream of just walking away. Now, compassion fatigue is a bit more subtle. It's when your heart has given and given and given until there's nothing left to give. It's not about hating the person you care for. You still love them. You want to show up. But your soul feels bruised from witnessing so much suffering for so long. It can look like mental fog, where you feel spaced out, overwhelmed, forgetful. You experience emotional numbness, where you begin to check out, even from people you care about. It includes loss of identity, where you can't even remember what you used to need. And shame and resentment. You start to resent the whole situation and hate yourself for feeling that way. That brings us to caregiving PTSD. Caregiving PTSD is when your body and mind can't turn off, even after the caregiving ends. It's when your nervous system was in survival mode for years and still hasn't found the off switch. You lived through it, but parts of you never came back. So to recap, burnout feels like you're running on fumes, barely able to keep going. Compassion fatigue feels like your heart is too tired to care, even though you desperately want to. And caregiving PTSD feels like your body never got the memo that the emergency is over. The trauma has ended, but it still lives in you. Caregiving PTSD isn't an official medical diagnosis yet, but science is catching up to what so many of us already lived. Let's talk about the impact caregiving PTSD can have, because it doesn't just affect your mind, it reaches into every corner of your life. Psychologically, it can show up as depression, anxiety, or a relentless sense of overwhelm. You may feel like you've lost your spark, your joy, even your sense of self. You start to feel like a stranger in your own skin. Physically, your body takes a hit. Insomnia becomes a nightly companion. Headaches, body aches, and a weakened immune system creep in. Chronic stress doesn't just wear you down, it rewires you. It increases your risk for serious health problems, even early death. Socially and economically, the fallout is just as real. Many caregivers struggle to return to work or keep working after the caregiving ends. Absenteeism, job loss, or career disruption are common. And friendships, relationships, they often suffer from lack of energy. There's just nothing left to give. And through it all, people still ask us, Why haven't you bounced back yet? As if healing from trauma follows a schedule. As if we're just supposed to flip the switch and go back to who we were before, when that version of us doesn't even exist anymore. Not every caregiver will develop PTSD, but some of us are more vulnerable than others. You're at higher risk if you had little or no support while caregiving. If you were caring for someone with dementia or cognitive decline, if your journey was long, intense, or painfully isolating, and especially if you were the only one who consistently showed up day after day without a break. You may have carried it all so well that no one realized how heavy it really was. But strength without support, that kind of strength leaves scars. Caregivers are often praised for being so strong, but we have to start asking, at what cost? For nearly 2 years after my dad died, I was still waking up multiple times a night, panicked that I missed an alarm, terrified he had fallen, even though he was no longer there. That's the grip caregiving PTSD can have on you. On top of the grief, I was carrying the residue of years spent in hypervigilance and trying to piece together a new life in the after. So how did healing begin? If you listened to my last episode, you know it started with tiny steps. A glass of water first thing in the morning, 5 extra minutes walking with my dogs, time outside, face turned toward the sun, letting nature remind me I was still here. It began with the belief that I deserved more, that I was capable of more, that maybe, just maybe, the spark I lost during my caregiving journey wasn't gone forever, just buried. And sometimes that spark returns in the most unexpected way. Sometimes it's another human, a kind soul sent, perhaps by one of your guardian angels. They enter your life for only a short time, but just long enough to hold a quiet match to that part of you that forgot how to burn. Someone who gently pulls back the slingshot just far enough to give you the momentum to launch yourself into a future you never believed you were allowed to dream of or even capable of achieving. We'll talk more about that kind of spark in future episodes. But for now, just know this. Healing didn't come like a lightning bolt. It came in small, tender, quietly defiant moments. Moments that were just enough to begin again, and enough to keep building one breath, one step at a time. So as we end this episode of New York Girl Again, please know, if you're still flinching at loud noises, if you're still waking in panic, you're not crazy. You're not weak. You are healing, and you're not alone. The trauma of caregiving deserves to be seen, and so do you. There is a future in the after, one that might take you places you've never been. You just have to give yourself the permission to begin. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone else who might be struggling. Tag at New York Girl Again, and let's rewrite what it means to live after caregiving. Your next chapter doesn't have to be about surviving. It can be about becoming. See you next week. You're doing better than you think.